Welcome to the world of Telly.
Hi, I'm Neil.
And I'm John.
And you're listening to World of Telly, the podcast where John and I watch every single TV programme ever made in no particular order. And what are we watching this week, John?
We're watching UFO.
Just in case you've been living under a rock and have no idea what we're talking about, UFO is a 26-part science fiction series produced by Jerry and Sylvia Anderson and Reg Hill. It was originally broadcast in a handful of ITV regions in September 1970, and it stars Ed Bishop, George Sewell, Michael Billington and Gabrielle Drake. It's also the first live-action TV series made by Century 21 Television Productions, but it wasn't their first stab at live-action science fiction, was it, John?
No, it wasn't. Obviously, the Andersons and Reg Hill had been working on their super marionation programs without going into the detailed history of them. I'm sure we'll get around to them at some point. They joined up with Lou Grade at a crucial time when they were running out of money, basically, and Lou Grade supported Supercar, and then they went from success to success, particularly with, Stingray, Thunderbirds. But then they had a yearning to do live action. And it's interesting, really, because Jerry and Sylvia made their success with the puppet shows, and a lot of them veered towards science fiction. But they really liked other kinds of programs on TV. One of the programs that they particularly loved was The Power Game.
Fantastic series. And The Planemakers as well.
Yeah, it started out as The Planemakers. It's with Patrick Wymark in it. And it was about kind of like, the managerial class, the factory floor workers. Everybody in it was a household name. And that's the kind of thing that they liked. But the other kind of program they watched, and one that they certainly kept an eye on, was an American TV series called The Invaders, a sci-fi program starring Roy Thinnes. That was about a man who saw a flying saucer land and then went around for 2 series trying to convince everybody else that there were alien doppelgangers.
Is that the one where the aliens have funny fingers?
Yeah, there was a great bit, I think, in the second series when up until that point, they can't bend one of their fingers. And that was the real signifier that, oh my God, it's an alien. And they went through all sorts of contrivances to avoid seeing the finger until kind of crucial moment. But then in the second series, it was brilliantly revealed that not all aliens had this, and some of them could bend the finger.
I thought they could only blend in if they were drinking tea.
Yeah, so obviously they liked The Invaders, and then they were trying to write a one-off TV play, a live-action TV play. Then they managed to sell it to Universal eventually. Lou Grade gave them kind of encouragement because he effectively bankrolled their company, which at that point had become Century 21. And the film was, in the UK, was known as Doppelganger, and in America it was called Journeys to the Far Side of the Sun. Now, I love it. I saw it when I was a kid, Bank Holiday Monday in the 70s.
It was on the TV all the time, wasn't it?
It seemed to be, and it's so bleak. I won't spoil it, but it's about as bleak as it gets. And it's got some great things in it, and it looks phenomenal. It was released in the UK for about, a day. But Lou Grade saw it, and he really liked it. He thought this proved that the Andersons could handle a live-action project, and that's really what led to UFO.
Ian Hendry, project director. Roy Thinnes, the astronaut. Patrick Wymark, project controller.
700. Fire retros. Hold it. 750. Jason. 850. Retros.
This is a private screening of what happens behind the scenes to those who reach beyond the good planet Earth.
There was another reason, wasn't there, why they didn't want to do puppet shows anymore, because there was just too many of them.
Yeah, the ITV regions were like landfill for puppet shows, even though they never networked these shows. So everybody got them at different times. They were convenient filler, and they were repeated endlessly. So as early as 1966, the ITA, the television authorities, were questioning how often these programs were being repeated as a handy way of plugging the gaps in the schedules. And Jerry Anderson himself said, we were drowning in our own product, and they were repeated so often, it got to the point that we had saturated the market. So something needed to change. There was just one series after another and multiple episodes. Lou Grade particularly realized it's time to do something else. Let's go with live action.
And live action science fiction, because science fiction was very big at this point in the late 60s, wasn't it? With films like 2001, and UFOs were very big. And obviously the moon landing was about to happen.
It was imminent, wasn't it? Yeah, there was all sorts of stuff about UFOs going on. There was the Project Blue Book in America, which, all of the UFO conspiracy people will know all about that. A bit later on, just as they were making UFO, the Condon report rubbished the idea that there were any UFOs, which is slightly unfortunate timing. But yeah, so that was, 2001, and the look of 2001 had made a massive impression. Moon landings, as you say, were imminent. The other thing that to factor in to UFO, which comes and goes in the story, was that organ transplants were quite big at this stage. Christian Barnard was in the process of doing the first heart transplant with someone who actually survived for any length of time. So that was in the news as well. And Jerry Anderson obviously decided to mash the two things up.
Lou Graves said that UFO is going to be like watching 2001 every week.
Yeah, I really like 2001. I'm not sure I want to watch it every week.
The series was conceived by Jerry and Sylvia and Reg. Now, Reg had worked with them for years. I think he produced Joe 90 and Captain Scarlet.
Yes, he had. I mean, I remember when I was a kid and you see his name come up, and Reg Hill. I remember my old flatmate and I used to consider him, he was like a small man with a flat cap on, constantly sitting down trying to mediate between Sylvia and Jerry. Please stop fighting, kind of thing.
We should mention, of course, that Jerry and Sylvia's marriage was on the rocks during the production of this program.
Yeah,
And it feeds into the program, I think, as well.
I think it definitely does. It feeds into the program in a number of ways, particularly
Yes.
because some of the members of the cast were cast because of their
Despite the other person. I
yeah,
think.
despite the other person, because they basically fancied them, which caused problems. But then, I mean, you say their marriage was on the rocks during this. I mean, their marriage seemed to be on the rocks for a very long time. There were quite a lot of programs made where they were kind of fighting, and the cast were very aware of it as well.
And also behind the scenes, I mean, there's various different writers that worked on the series, but the main one, and the one that I would say is really the sort of voice of UFO, is Tony Barwick. Now, he also was known to the Andersons for working on Thunderbirds and Captain Scarlet, but he had an interesting background, didn't he?
Yeah, he didn't start off as a writer or with any pretensions to be a writer. He actually worked in computing, and his way in to drama and writing drama was that he was asked by someone he knew to kind of give some background details about computing on an episode of Danger Man to make the story more convincing and have a real touch. And instead of just giving them a brief about what he actually wrote some dramatic scenes involving computers, and the people who were making the program liked the scene so much that they decided to commission him to do more, and that's how he got his way in. And he was kind of tireless. I mean, he wrote an enormous amount of Captain Scarlet.
Half of them, I think.
Pretty much. And he was brought into Thunderbirds when Lou Grade loved Thunderbirds so much that he decided it should go from a half-hour show to a 50-minute show. So Barwick was brought in to try and beef them up. So obviously at this point, Jerry Anderson turned to him because he just was able to turn scripts out very, very quickly. It's good to talk about Barwick, I think, a little bit, because he's a slightly mysterious figure. I think he was such a sort of retiring kind of guy that you don't really hear much about him. But fortunately, he was interviewed by a couple of people from Fanderson, Chris Drake and Alan Howard, in the mid-'80s. And it's an interesting interview up to a point. But he was clearly a very, I write, I get commissioned, I write it. And he has this quote where he says, I'm not interested in the words that I write, in that they're sacred magic or anything. It's a job. But he does say, which for him is like incredible praise, that he thinks the best UFOs are basically the best things that Jerry has ever done. And the other point he makes, which we'll get onto in terms of the audience for UFO, when he was asked, was it supposed to be a kids program? He goes, no, I don't think it was a kids program. You can't make a program that expensive just for kids, because the investment was at such a different order to the Supermarionation shows.
This was the most expensive British TV program made at that time, I believe.
Yeah, according to Variety, they said at that point the costliest project ever mounted by a British company. And there are varying estimates of the budget, but that quote says it was a budget of £4 million, which is about 61 million now.
Wow.
Depending on what you look at, for 26 episodes, which makes it all the more bizarre when you think of that much money being spent on a program for British TV, that it was just so roundly ignored by all the other stations. It just seems crazy. Yeah, 2001 every week. We're spending £4 million. Yeah, we're not interested.
Should we talk about the premise of the program?
Yeah.
What it is actually about. It's essentially a 1970 version of Torchwood in the sense that you've got this top secret organization battling against this alien menace, this organization called SHADO, which stands for Supreme Headquarters Alien Defense Organization. And I always laugh when I say it, but it's hidden underneath a film studio
Yes.
and run by Ed Straker, played by Ed Bishop, his third appearance on this podcast, I might add. And their main mission is to basically stop these UFOs with the help of the moon base, where they've got these interceptors. They've also got loads of submarines, which have got like fighter jets attached to them. They've got little mobile vehicles that go around the countryside blowing things up.
Yeah, that's the strength of it. I think the organization has been formed because they've gradually realized that terrible things are happening. And the cause is actually that aliens are coming in, murdering loads of people. And it starts with something happening in 1970, basically. And then it goes to 1980. And in that 10 years, I mean, comparatively recently, the SHADO moon base has been completed. So they've taken 10 years to build up all of these sort of, as you say, tripartite set of defenses to take on the UFOs as they hurtle from deep space.
The thing about the film studio, I mean, it kind of makes sense in some ways. I mean, if you're going to bring back a crashed UFO to a film studio, no one's going to bat an eyelid. So that kind of makes sense. What doesn't make sense is the fact that Ed Straker has two jobs. He's basically got to protect Earth from the aliens, but also got to produce some films as well. Why did they get someone to do that side of the job for him? He's constantly being distracted by going to screenings, reading scripts, having meetings with producers, all while the Earth is under threat. It's bizarre.
It is bizarre, and he's not the only one either. You know, it's like Paul Foster, who we'll talk about, is like, you know, he's even more hands-on than Ed Straker. The poor sod, he has to be a film producer down on the set, dealing with actors and directors, as well as fending off the alien menace. How far does this go? Because you think to yourself, what's the HR department doing in all of this? Does the film studio and SHADO have separate HR departments, or is there one that is aware, is cognizant? And it just kind of boggles the mind about how they keep this going. One of the things that was great about reading some of the background to this, but also thanks to one website, the novelizations of UFO, which were sort of based on the early scripts as opposed to what was actually transmitted. There's actually an attempt at an explanation for why the film studio is the cover. But as you say, it's because of the fact that they can bring in any kit that they like. I'll quote it. The locals will shrug their shoulders and say it's just those maniacs at Harlington Straker getting involved in another expensive flop. And Paul Foster says, what, we specialize in flops? And Alec Freeman, you know, second in command, says, twice we made a profit. 2 terrible films, really terrible. And they went over big at the box office. Commander Straker was furious. And the reason that they're furious is that Straker is constantly asking for huge amounts of money for SHADO. And then what they're not geared up for is then suddenly having loads of money that has emerged from a film and being a real success that they've somehow got to explain away to the government, that they've managed to make money out of their military operation. So this was actually, you know, obviously it's crossed enough people's mind to think we might have to have an explanation for this insanity.
And this is why you have a scene of Straker watching the rushes of a really boring documentary.
About fish.
I'm afraid you'll have to excuse me. Well, I was so intrigued with your picture that I nearly forgot I have an appointment to meet the backer of our next film, and I'm already very late.
I quite understand, Mr. Straker.
You have a very good film there.
Thank you, Mr. Straker.
They should have been making sci-fi films, surely. That would have made the most sense.
It is great, that bit. That bit's actually quite funny because he basically is suggesting more scenes that are really boring about fish to make the film even worse. Then he's having to pivot to battling the alien menace. It must be difficult to juggle the two things.
Shall we talk about the main cast members of SHADO? I mentioned Ed Bishop.
Who's great.
He was, of course, the voice of Captain Blue in Captain Scarlet, so he was well known to the Andersons.
And he'd been in 2001 as well, and Journey to the Far Side of the Sun.
Second in command, George Sewell. He was also in Journey to the Far Side of the Sun and The Power Game.
And he was in The Power Game, exactly. Yeah, that's right. I mean, yeah, all of the stuff to do with the politics and the business thing, that all comes from The Power Game. That's why it's so strong in there. But yeah, so they obviously really kind of cast from The Power Game and then carried on doing that.
Well, Ed Straker has the same secretary, doesn't he, as
Yes.
John Wilder. Different name, but same actress.
Yeah.
Norma Ronald, who
Absolutely.
again I think is also in Journey to the Far Side of the Sun.
Yeah, the two things are knitted closely together.
You've also got Peter Gordino, who wasn't known as being an actor. He's playing one of the pilots of Sky One.
Yeah.
I think this was Sylvia's choice.
Yeah, I think the theory was that what's quite funny is that they thought in the future, like 10 years' time, it's not like in the far future, everybody will be good looking, and George Sewell. And so I think Gordino was making a name for himself as a singer and a dancer. And Sylvia really sort of, like people who look good, wearing the outfits. So she went for Gordino, and they both apparently really liked Gordino, but he's
dreadful.
Yeah.
I know it's a cheap shot to compare the actors to puppets, but I think it does a disservice to the puppets. There's a scene at the end of the first episode where Peter Gordino's character is told that his sister has had her organs harvested 10 years ago. And he looks like he's just been told he's going to have to work a double shift on a Saturday. I can imagine Jerry Anderson, who directed that episode, going, can't we get the other head? Can we get the emoting head and change it?
What I love about that is that contrast between the fact that you've got a really interesting bit about Straker, how Straker will never blanch from telling the worst news. He will always just do it. And Bishop throughout, I think, is really, really good at Straker. Really holds it, fantastic starring role. But then he's delivering it to Gordino. And it's just unfair in so many different ways.
Your sister was last seen in the vicinity of a UFO incident nearly 10 years ago. The alien's body recovered from the sea was subjected to intense medical examination. The heart was a transplant. The donor was Leela Carlin.
What will you tell your parents?
I don't know.
You realize, of course, that they can never know the truth.
And Peter Gordino didn't last very long, did he? I think it was 6 episodes.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a slightly odd story because I was watching one of the old Fanderson UFO documentaries when Gordino was still alive. And Gordino was convinced until the day he died that the reason he went was his agent thought he would be typecast if he stayed in it any longer. And Gordino was interviewed and he was saying things like, oh, I maybe should have put up a bit more of a fight with my agent about that because I did miss it after I went to it. And actually, that was not the reason. It was because Lou Grade's brother, Bernard Delfont, who was a very powerful man, had a grudge against Gordino for leaving his talent agency. And he said to Lou Grade, how dare you cast him? Get rid of him. And Lou Grade said very apologetically, blood's thicker than water, he's got to go. And Jerry and Sylvia Anderson went to the agent and with the agent concocted a story which Gordino was convinced was the case right up, until he died. He never knew the truth.
So he wasn't fired for being a bad actor. That's
no,
incredible
amazingly.
To me.
and Sylvia and Jerry Anderson, apparently, even when they're in the middle of, their massive arguments about everything under the sun, the one thing they agreed on was how much they both wanted Gordino to stay in the series.
And the other actor who caused a bit of consternation would have been George Sewell. I don't think those over in America thought he was attractive enough to be on TV.
No, and I made a joke about that earlier, but which was unfair. But yeah, Abe Mandel, the ITC guy in America, said rather brutally to Lou Grade and Jerry Anderson, get rid of the pockmarked one. And they resisted. He got slightly sidelined for a bit more Paul Foster. They resisted that, and also because he was a very, very popular man on set. And in the end, it was when they had to make the move between film studios that they phased him out. And again, Sewell was never told. I find it hard to believe that Sewell would have been all that bothered by it. I mean, he had a perfectly great career. But apparently Jerry Anderson was saying to Ed Bishop, should I tell George after all this? And Ed Bishop advised him not to bother. Yeah, so Sewell never knew that story either.
I don't like it. These clouds give about as much cover as a G-string on a belly dancer.
Another major character is Paul Foster, played by Michael Billington, and he came in at the last minute to replace another actor who was also terrible.
Yes, Franco De Rosa was in Journey to the Far Side of the Sun.
What a surprise.
He was very good looking. Sylvia Anderson wanted him in it, and Jerry trusted her judgment. But basically, on the first day they started filming, he was meant to be the Moonbase leader. And Jerry, I think, didn't really like him very much because Sylvia obviously fancied him. He apparently was pretty hopeless, so they got rid of him really quickly. And Jerry promoted Gabrielle Drake, who was in a smaller role on the moon base, and made her the equivalent of him. But of course, also that made Sylvia extremely jealous because clearly Jerry Anderson really fancied Gabrielle Drake. So it was all happening, basically.
Lieutenant Ellis?
Good morning, Gay. I think I might have some action for you. I want Moonbase put on yellow alert from 1045 to track Seagull X-ray. Now it's carrying Shadow VIPs on the Utronic equipment. So let's keep everybody on their toes. We can't afford to take chances.
Roger. Joan, announce a yellow alert for 10:45.
Yes, Lieutenant.
And one other person, very important, I think, to UFO is, of course, Barry Gray and the incredible theme music. You've got quite a lot of information about this, haven't you?
I thought I'd ask a friend of mine because basically I've got no music ability, and all I could really say about the theme tune for UFO is that it's a banger. I asked a musician friend of mine, Jason Hazley, who's actually performed Barry Gray's music with the Charles Hazelwood All-Star Collective, and I asked him to analyse why the theme is so brilliant. And he did provide a very interesting technical summary of it, but his first comment was that it's a banger. He talks about the rhythm section, the syncopations, the 3 against 4 in both quarter note and eighth note. But I will push all of that forward, the whole analysis on our newsletter on the Patreon, because it's definitely worth looking at. But just to say that it was the 16th of October 1969, between 9:30 a.m. and 12:30, where the magic happened. 40 musicians were involved in it, and the incredible Hammond organ, which is, absolutely brilliant on it, was Harry Stoneham, who was the musical director of the Parkinson Show all through the 70s. He used to appear in Parkinson quite often. You used to see him in the background. Famous session musician, brilliant Hammond player. So, yeah, amazing music.
It is an incredible title sequence, isn't it?
Yeah.
The pacing of it, the opening shot, which is, if you haven't seen it, is an alien having a contact lens removed.
Yeah, kind of like an all-eye covering contact lens pulled out. And the alien, of course, is sort of like, it's got green stained skin. And it kind of sums up the program in a way, doesn't it? That they start with such a horrifying image, but it caused problems with the fact that they pitched it at kids, or the TV companies did.
They must have seen the name Jerry Anderson and just automatically assumed this is a kids' program. And the first image is this horrific body horror.
Well, exactly. And apparently some regions used to fade in the credits, so that bit was missed out. I read a thing where one of the guys who was pitching the program to the merchandiser, the toy merchandisers, and he basically put his head in his hands when he saw that opening shot, and he just tried to gloss over it. I think the thing is, Jerry and Sylvia Anderson thought it was an adult program. I think that Tony Barwick, as he said, thought it was an adult program. But both in terms of going to America and being on in America in the for the US networks, they couldn't have anything too adult in it. And also, it was always going to be pre-Watershed in the UK at best. And, as we know, it was later, we'll talk about it was on Saturday mornings and so on and so forth. So whatever they were making, it was never going to find that slot that would actually work for that. But what you end up with are programs that have very kind of adult themes, are very bleak, but they also have long launch sequences for a really sexy kit, just like in Thunderbirds and things like that. So it becomes a really odd program in that respect.
Towards the end, there's blood everywhere.
Yeah, and actually the first episode was cut a bit, wasn't it? Because that had an unedited sequence with loads of blood, like people being machine gunned down. But no, it does.
Oh, at the beginning, yeah.
It does get very violent. It was so compromised. I think that's the problem with it. One of the big problems with the whole series is it's horribly compromised in terms of its content. Because the thing about the organ transplants is that the reason given in a fairly horrific way in the first episode that the aliens are even coming is because they're coming to harvest organs because they're a dying race. And that then sort of gets forgotten slightly for a while. They don't mention it. And part of that was because it was too horrific a concept to have. And then towards the end, they even start to completely play with the idea that might not be the reason at all, but the alternatives aren't particularly great either. So it's really odd for that reason.
This report indicates 5 major organ and gland transplants. In the case of the heart, tissue compatibility test shows that it was human in origin. It came from Earth, gentlemen. Therefore, one of the reasons they must obviously come is to obtain organ replacements.
So we've talked about the human elements of this program, but like you've said before, a lot of it is to do with like the hardware and the sexy military equipment. Who designed that?
Well, the SFX supervisor was the legendary Derek Meddings, who, I think everybody knows was a total genius and went on to be massively important in the Bond films after this. And again, I don't think you can quite overestimate the importance of what Anderson did with getting these people and developing some of these people as well in terms of what happened in the film industry afterwards. So you had Meddings, who designed, he had a nightmare with the UFO itself, I think, which never came out in this country as a piece of merchandise. You'd thought they'd be great for spinning tops, wouldn't you, or something like that. But he designed all of those, and everything just looks absolutely terrific. We didn't mention Sid, did we? Sid is a sort of an unmanned space station that keeps a watch out for if any UFOs are coming, and he's very Hal.
He's personified literally by a room full of flashing lights, isn't he?
But they are great flashing lights as well.
That's true.
The ship looks great, and just the space scenes are really, really excellent. You also got a guy called Mike Trim, who was Derek Meddings' assistant, and he incidentally did the cover for Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds. Then there was art director Bob Bell, who did a deathless quote on something I saw him when he talked about UFO. He said, "I never quite knew what my budget was." You can tell. There are a few series that look quite as astonishing, I think.
What's your favourite design in UFO? What's your favourite bit of kit? It's got to be the Interceptors, I think.
The only problem with the Interceptors, they're sort of one shot and they're useless, aren't they?
Yeah, but they are nuclear missiles.
It's true. They are. That's true. I just remember that when people had them as toys, they always lost the missile.
Did you have the dinky toy version of the Interceptor?
I didn't. I never had any of the
I
UFO
did.
ones. I had Space 1999 ones.
It was bright green.
Was it?
For some inexplicable reason, it was bright green, and I lost my missile, I think, on day 2.
Yeah, they were just meant to be lost, weren't they, those
Yeah.
missiles? And then the other thing, of course, is Sylvia Anderson's costumes, which all look insane. The kind of silver, incredibly close-fitting uniforms that they have, that they then go and take the bottom off and then put a silver miniskirt on to relax.
Yeah, there's a whole sequence in the first episode, isn't there, where they're basically stripping off.
Yeah. I think the first episode doesn't do a lot of favors to some of the perceptions of UFO, but the costumes are astonishing. There is a slight issue that, a lot of the bit part players were just models, and therefore some of the acting performances, even when they've got about one line, can leave a bit to be desired. But everybody is just really good looking.
Yeah, if you're a man, you get to wear Nehru jackets, which look quite smart. And if you're a woman, you get to wear a purple wig. Doesn't seem fair.
The purple wig, I don't think we should go there. Some people have tried to rationalise them. There's no rationalising.
How have they rationalised
Well,
it?
there's something about deflecting static on the moon
What?
base or something. But why isn't Paul Foster wearing one? But then Paul Foster's wearing his own selection of wigs.
He wears some incredible costumes as well. There's a Baco foil astronaut suit and silver Wellington boots he wears, which is fantastic.
There's one which was causing me and Shirley some great hilarity towards the end, where he wears it several times, where he looks like he's either an Aston Villa, West Ham or Burnley supporter. He's like constantly you're expecting him to go, "What do you mean, Straker? I've got to get to Upton Park."
We haven't mentioned, have we, that it was shot on 35mm film, like a lot of the ITC stuff, sort of future-proofing it, and it does look fantastic. It looks like it was shot yesterday.
It does, and it's, it was filmed at MGM British at Borehamwood, where lots of films have been made, including 2001. In fact, it might have been 2001 that was responsible for the studio closing down a few years later. But yeah, it was filmed there, and The Prisoner had been filmed just a couple of year or so before that as well. And it was proper, they were proper film studios, which was quite trepidatious for some of the people working on it because they'd only ever worked in Slough. It is an amazing looking program.
This is Moonbase to all SHADO stations. Moonbase to all SHADO stations.
UFO sighted, 428146 green, will report.
Attention all defense systems. This is a maximum security alert. Attention all defense systems. I say again, this is a maximum security alert. Condition red.
Talking about the program, it's almost 2 seasons, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even though they're in a big block of 26, which we'll explain a little bit later why that happened. Should we talk about the first 17 episodes?
Yeah.
Known as the Borehamwood episodes?
Yeah.
Any highlights in there for you? I mean, the first episode, I think, does a really good job of setting up the premise, shows you all the hardware, captures an alien, tells you about all the heart transplant stuff and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Does a really good job. And then after that, which are the ones that stand out for you?
Well, there's a whole load of episodes which sort of introduce and feature Paul Foster. He came into the program late because of the, as we mentioned, the Italian actor kind of being bombed out of it, and they introduced Paul Foster into it. But then they realised, Tony Barwick said, "Well, we need an introductory episode," and effectively they had this introductory episode with Paul Foster, who was a pilot who sees a UFO and then is a cover-up because SHADO are obviously a secret organisation. And it's quite a good episode, actually. He attempts to get to the heart of the conspiracy. But at the end, it sort of sums up Paul Foster. He's been fighting everyone. He doesn't care what happens to him as long as he reveals the conspiracy. And then as soon as he gets invited into the conspiracy, he's all for it.
He's producing films before you know it.
Exactly. He's a film producer and he's a moonbase commander all at the same time. There's a typical Tony Barwick thing of a dream episode. This was something that happened a lot with Anderson programs. And it's got some good things in it because of the fact that Paul gets converted into an alien and it starts breathing liquid like the aliens do. But then at the end, it's all literally a dream.
I love Paul Foster as a character. He's just so handsome.
Well, he's very handsome if you can just look at him and ignore the various fringes that he has because of his struggle throughout the series to get the right wig. Even Andrew Pixley in his brilliant Blu-ray notes at one point says, at this point, Michael Billington settled on a wig for the rest of the series or something like that. You can't ignore it. It's just all over the place. I find him a bit of a creep, I have to say. He's always coming on in the worst circumstances to any woman that he meets, even if the situation is really grave and they're up against time. And he likes using the amnesia drug.
Yes, we haven't mentioned that yet, have we? The amnesia drug. It's like retcon from Torchwood, isn't it?
Well, it is like exactly like that, but it also there's a hint, more than a hint, I think, that before the amnesia drug existed, they were willing to kill people who found out about SHADO. Paul Foster, at least on 2 occasions, uses it as an opportunity to go and see the person who's had their memory wiped so he can introduce himself in an interesting way to them and basically sort of say, I bet you're a so-and-so, or you look like a particle physicist to me. And they go, how do you know that? And it's like, because I'm a real creepy guy and I know you've had an amnesia drug.
Excuse me. I don't think you know me, but my name's Foster. Paul Foster. Now, I would say you are some kind of geologist. May I sit down?
Why, yes. How did you know I was a geologist?
My favourite episode is Question of Priorities, which is the episode where Straker has to make a decision between saving the life of his son and capturing an alien. Well, actually, he doesn't make the choice, does he? George Sewell makes it for him, and his son dies. And it's so bleak.
It is, I've seen it a few times and I watched it again, and I am always amazed at how good it is. The great thing about it is that it's not Straker's decision to divert the transport. The transport has got a crucial drug that will save his son's life. It's a good story because there's an alien who's actually a traitor alien, and he's trying to make contact with the human race. So that's really interesting. So George Sewell diverts the transporter. He has no idea. Straker, as usual, has not told anyone anything. And there's a phenomenal scene where Freeman just says, oh, well, obviously I've diverted it to the thing. And Straker just looks at him and says, what have you done? And Freeman says, is there a problem? And Straker just goes, no. And it's a really well acted scene where it's just this horrifying realization that this has happened, but he doesn't do anything to stop it and doesn't even confide in Freeman that this terrible thing has happened. So it's brilliant. And actually, even more brilliant was, I only found this out recently, was that they filmed a sequence to use as the last scene. They don't get to the alien, so they never find out what was going on. The alien just gets killed. So it was all for nothing anyway. And the alien was in an old lady's cottage. And the old lady, at the end, there was a thing where Straker went to see the old lady, and the old lady says she's blind, and she says something to him like, "I sense you're a good man." And it's supposed to be sort of cheering Straker up a bit. They decided, we're not going to use that. We're going to end it with him desolate. And there's a final long shot, isn't there, of him on like a checkerboard floor as well. So it's like classic kind of porn in the chess game. It's a great episode.
I never want to see you again.
And it affects him so much, he actually has flashbacks to it several times in the series, doesn't he?
He does. The continuity, because of the nature of these kind of programs, they were made to be shown in any order. But yeah, there is a bit of continuity and a bit of thought to it, because then the other very good episode, which, by the way, these episodes were hated by ITC in America. We wanted a sci-fi program. You're showing us people having tea in Hertfordshire, was basically their view of it. Whereas Anderson's favourite episode was a question of priorities. But yeah, there's an episode called Confetti Check A-OK, which, as well as showing the destruction of Straker's marriage because of his job, it also has loads of really interesting backstory about the formation of SHADO.
I think one of my favourite downbeat endings, because there's quite a few downbeat endings in this, is in the episode The Square Triangle.
Yep.
And in that one, they use the amnesia drug again. And even though SHADO know that this couple are going to try and murder this woman's husband, they just give them the amnesia drug and just let them go off and kill him.
They do. And Straker just doesn't even give it a second thought, does he? Alec Freeman character is like the Jiminy Cricket, or Paul Foster, they're the Jiminy Cricket, but Straker's like, no. Doesn't even give it a second thought. And then it ends with the wife standing over the grave of the husband.
So they just let her get on with it. It's insane.
Mrs. Newton and Fowler said they heard an intruder and shot him as he forced open the door.
Plausible.
Yes. If they weren't expecting the husband.
The husband?
He came back to the cottage 40 minutes ago.
Is our security angle covered?
Yes, that's all taken care of. But don't you see what it means? They planned a cold-blooded murder. They had it all worked out. But unfortunately for them, an alien came through that door instead of her husband.
Kill Straker's a great episode.
Kill Straker is fantastic, and not just because Paul Foster and Michael Billington get absolutely slapped around for real by Ed Bishop as Straker. It's great. It's at the end, it's basically Straker's trying to slap the brainwashing out of him. They basically decided, the actors, that they'd go for it because of the way it was being filmed. They couldn't fake it. But apparently even Michael Billington wasn't quite prepared for how hard he gets hit. And you can see it. He gets absolutely smacked in the face by it, which is brilliant. And the other great thing about it, we haven't mentioned somebody else who becomes a regular, which is the character Dr. Jackson, played by Wladek Szabel. He's
brilliant.
Phenomenal actor. Was in Kanal, I think, the Polish film. He was in From Russia with Love. And he's just so good in it. But again, as I always used to think when I watched it, particularly when I watched quite a lot of episodes in the 90s, he's like he's just wandered in from something else.
He's very creepy, isn't he?
He's creepy. He's like when because he's actually an antagonist. He's the one who is the prosecutor when Paul Foster gets accused of
that's right, yeah.
of espionage, of being a traitor. But even when he's supposed to be the good guy, he's actually, you're thinking, what's his motivation here? What is he going to do? Because he's just got such a brilliant way of playing it.
He's doing all these weird experiments on the side and not telling anybody about them.
Yeah, and then he only reveals it when it's total happenstance. He goes, "Yes, I have a theory about that." and Straker says things like, "Well, why haven't you told us?" And he says, "It is inconclusive." I mean, Kill Straker's fascinating as well because two people get brainwashed to kill Straker, and the way they get brainwashed is by a voice going, "Kill Straker, kill Straker." One guy tries immediately to stab Straker with a hypo, and then he tries to blow up in a suicide bombing, blows up the moon base. Paul Foster tries office politics to unseat Straker.
He tries to annoy him first.
And it's such a weird approach that they both take. Maybe the aliens are just kind of like spread betting. We'll go with the direct approach, but we'll also try and undermine him as well.
I think you should put yourself on the furlough roster. 3 to 4 months complete rest.
You think I'm falling down on the job?
I think it's got to you. I think you're obsessed with SHADO and Ed Straker. I think you're making decisions without any real thought to the consequences.
Like that re-entry angle?
Yes, like that re-entry angle. I like spending millions on moon bases when they're needed on Earth. Like 100 other instances I can name.
Yeah, the aliens have got some weird plans, haven't they, John?
Yeah. It's almost as if they're getting quite desperate at times. They try animal possession, creating a time bubble, including a traitor who's immune to the time bubble. That sounds logistically quite difficult to work through. They try and kill Straker in a number of ways, including via ESP. One of the classics, the absolute classics, is in Reflections in the Water, where they create an exact replica of Shadow Command underwater in a dome, and then they clone Straker and everybody else as Shadow Command, but the aliens can't speak English, so they record shadow broadcasts and chop them into different messages and then train themselves to mime to the dialogue, like a mad episode of Top of the Pops or something. Yeah, the aliens, they must have spies everywhere because they know so much about what's going on in Shadow. And also, even though they're supposed to want our organs, they also try and wipe out all of humanity on a couple of occasions.
With a nerve gas, yeah.
Well, there's a nerve gas for all of humanity, and then they've been planting bombs for at least 10 years that will wipe out cities that are activated by sunlight. And when they try something mad, then Paul Foster usually will say something like, well, I'm sure they won't try that again. Why would you say that?
The aliens become obsessed with Straker, don't they? They stop trying to invade the Earth and just want to kill Straker as if Shadow won't exist.
Yeah.
If Straker's dead.
Even they're in the grip of Straker's charisma, aren't they? That's the thing. They just can't stop thinking about him.
Because one thing you'll notice if you watch the episodes in production order is that the character of Ed Straker, he starts off as the bureaucrat in the office directing all the action, but as the series progresses, he becomes much more the action figure, goes out in the field a lot more. For example, in the episode Sub Smash, he ends up on a submarine and there's a whole episode about his claustrophobia. So his character definitely developed over time, I think.
Oh, absolutely. He becomes full Kirk towards the end, doesn't he? Where he's been sent madly into hugely dangerous situations. And yeah, I mean, he ends up in one episode with a massive bazooka missile launcher on his shoulder, fighting a UFO single-handed. So it's a definite difference from the Power Game Patrick Wymark character, which he sort of starts off as.
But where does he find the time to produce all these great films?
Exactly. That's the thing. All these flops about fish.
Yeah.
Sub Smash is a good episode, and it's the final one filmed at MGM Borehamwood. Apparently, the scene where Straker's running out of air staring at the air gauges is the very last scene ever shot at MGM Borehamwood.
Because they thought that was going to be it, didn't they?
Well, I don't think they quite knew what was going to happen, did they, at the time? I think they thought they had to have more episodes for America, basically. I don't think 17 would ever be enough.
They had to make 26 because that was the only way they could get it into syndication.
Yeah.
But they had to move from Borehamwood to Pinewood. And like you were saying, that's probably because of 2001?
Well, 2001, you know, obviously took absolutely ages to film. What was it, 2.5 years or something mad like that? And basically, it didn't get charged to the film. Like a normal production would be charged for studio time. They didn't charge Kubrick for 2001. And 2001 took over loads of MGM Borehamwood. So basically, they couldn't get money from other productions because there wasn't much room for any other productions to work there. But then the British film industry was plunging at this point into the sort of despond, and it, you know, as it was in the 70s, it became like a, you know, on its last legs. There'd been the British boom, and America saw it as a great place to invest money. And as soon as it wasn't worth their while, they pulled out. So MGM Borehamwood closed down, and UFO had to go into storage. They had to put everything into storage until the space appeared at Pinewood.
And when they came back, there was quite a few cast changes. George Sawler was let go.
Yeah.
Peter Gordina had already left. Gabrielle Drake, I don't think she was available, so she was gone as well. I suppose the main person who's introduced at this point is Wanda Ventham as Virginia Lake.
I really love Wanda Ventham. But for a lot of the episodes, they had a generic second in command. They didn't know that she was going to be in it. And in one of them, she's basically taken a role of someone who's supposed to be like a bit part as a computer operator, which is why she keeps talking about what the computer's saying. And it doesn't make any sense. So there's only 2 or 3 episodes, I think, where she actually plays, you know, what you might think of as a proper character. But by then, the series was coming to an end anyway.
I think the last 9 episodes are the best episodes of the season. What do you think?
I mean, I think you can tell the difference. That the directors of the Borehamwood episodes were largely people who'd worked with Anderson on the Supermarionation shows. And they were naturally finding their feet quite a bit. And they'd be very responsive to actors because they hadn't worked with actors before. They'd worked with puppets. Ed Bishop himself says, if I'd have said, oh, can I try that again and do it in this different way? They'd say yes. Whereas the people who directed the last few, I mean, people like David Tomblin, we'll mention him in a minute, they were like really experienced hands. Loads of people who made tons of ITC programs. And they would just tell Ed Bishop to piss off. They certainly throw everything at it. I think you can tell. They don't get attacked by one UFO. They get attacked by 20. They really throw the kitchen sink at it. But it was also against the backdrop of the fact that after a few episodes, they were starting to run out of money. There's a few factors in there, but they're definitely different. And they're quite, well, I think it's safe to say they're quite weird. I don't know whether it was meant to be appealing more to ITC America, perhaps, in terms of the action at any rate. No more tea in Hertfordshire. Lou Grade said to Jerry Anderson, they're taking advantage of it. We'll get David Tomblin in. He knows how to get a series, going. And I'm sure that Jerry Anderson really liked that. But of course, Tomblin went on to become like one of the most respected first unit directors of all time. He worked on like mega blockbusters and he'd worked on The Prisoner. He'd written episodes and he wrote some of these episodes, and he came into UFO and he wrote some wacky episodes and he directed some episodes in a particularly wacky way. And afterwards Jerry Anderson saying, I didn't know what it meant, kind of thing. There's an episode that has an LSD trip in it and Anderson's saying, I didn't know it was supposed to be that.
What are they?
Oh, it's just something to make me relax.
I don't believe you.
They're perfectly harmless.
What do they do?
Here, try a couple. It's all right. They're not addictive.
I think two of the best episodes from that last batch has got to be Mindbender and Time Lash, which are similar in many ways in that they're complete mindfucks.
They are the greatest, I think, I don't want to overstate it, but I do still think that Mindbender and Time Lash are two of the greatest examples of working within your means on a TV program that there have ever been, because Mindbender was basically written by Tony Barwick and he was told you can't use anything other than standing sets. And he basically turns it into a clip show. It's a clip show because there are lots of flashback clips.
It's the best clip show I've ever seen.
And it's amazing. The way that they are incorporated is exactly as we were talking about earlier. Straker's seeing the death of his son played out again, while the Paul Foster character creepily smiles at him. It's just astonishing. And the bit where basically everybody's sent mad by hallucinogenic rock planted by the aliens, and Straker picks it up and has this astonishing argument with General Almighty Henderson. Henderson starts going, you're nothing but a bunch of spineless, gutless sheep. Then immediately, when they have the whole sequence, when it's in this insanity of what Straker's seeing, the whole film studio comes back to life. There's a giant hand, a giant white hand, which is from an episode of The Persuaders, which was being filmed on the next lot. And then he's going down corridors and people are crisscrossing with this echoey sound, which is like something out of a David Lynch film. It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. And then Time Lash, again, the film studio gets involved. They're in a time bubble. They have to shoot themselves with space meth to stop themselves freezing in time, and didn't seem to think that this might be a problem, that you show them both injecting, literally injecting the stuff. And it starts off again with Straker going mad and smashing everything up. But it's just a great episode. But then, because it's set on the film set and it's got Patrick Allen saying, big man, Straker.
The man from the Barrett advert.
Yeah, and there's a brilliant line that he says, the man the ladies all admire, which is such a weird thing to say.
It's a fantastic performance.
It is a great performance, and they go around in little kind of go-kart things, which are just extraordinary as well. And the whole thing is just completely nuts. But when Straker says, I think he's over at lots J and K, that's where UFO was filmed, on J and K at Pinewood. So they're literally referring to the sets that they're working on, and it's extraordinary, really.
No, it's not that easy, big man. Things always come easy for you, don't they, Straker? Not this time. Not me.
He's around the corner, by the covered way to J and K block. Over here. Now stay behind that wall.
I think the last 9 episodes are so different in terms of style and content that it kind of makes sense to watch the series in the ATV order, where they mix them all up. The changing gear then doesn't seem so abrupt.
Yeah, I sort of agree with that. I think it's interesting to watch them in production order, but some of them are a bit obviously the same in terms of the settings, and they're quite repetitive. The ATV order, the only problem with that is one of the episodes we're talking about, The Cat with 10 Lives, which is directed by Tomlin. It's got Alexis Canner from The Prisoner in it.
Who's great.
He's very good. He's very good. He's an interceptor pilot. He always brings a little business, Alexis Canner. He does a thing before he shoots the aliens where he kisses his thumb.
Yes, and then rubs it on the joystick.
Yeah, and it's things like that. Alexis Canner was brilliant for stuff like that. But it's a super bleak story because his pregnant wife gets carted off by the aliens for spare parts. But then the big thing is that the aliens, and again, it's Dr. Jackson is basically saying, maybe the aliens aren't actually humanoid and they can just put their consciousness into anything and they put it into a cat. So it's quite radical. I think having that really early sort of completely undermines the fact that you've had one reason for aliens. It's better towards the end. But yeah, it's, I'm sure we've all got strong opinions about the orders, but yeah. Not the original order. I think ATV did it. I think it's got too many weird things in there.
Okay. Maybe we'll put the definitive orders together on our Patreon.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Let's talk about the transmission of UFO, because it's kind of weird, isn't it? Not all the ITV regions wanted to have anything to do with it, did they? I think only 3 of them picked it up. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it was taken up initially anyway by 3. I think it was debuted in Canada a couple of days before ATV and the other couple of regions showed it. So that was 1970, September 1970. LWT didn't even start showing it until a year later. And Granada didn't show it for ages either.
I think they had a backlog, didn't they, of colour programmes that they were saving for when the colour transmission came on. Created a backlog, I think.
I think, yeah, there's all sorts of reasons. The other reason, of course, is that there was a political situation between Lou Grade and London Weekend Television. LWT had a difficult genesis, and Lou Grade was constantly jonesing to take over London again because he'd had London at the weekend before. There was a real antipathy there. So there was lots of reasons why this didn't happen, and there was no kind of consensus about when the programme should be shown. But ATV showed about, what was it, not the 17, but it was about 15 or so. And then they repeated them all again at a different time. Because it was so heavily regionalised, despite the expense, despite how amazing it looked, despite all of these things, it got pretty much derided and patronised because it was like, oh, the humans are like puppets. They're indistinguishable. It was that obvious cheap shot. And it was just shown in the same way as, I don't know, the Baron would be shown. And it didn't have any kind of cultural penetration, apart from things like merchandising and the fact that, again, blurring the issue, it had a comic strip in Countdown. It all went quiet, basically.
I think we're too young to watch it on the original transmission, weren't we?
Yeah.
I think I saw it, and I think you saw it too, in 1974, when they repeated it on Sunday afternoons in ATV region.
I almost certainly saw some of them. They also repeated it on weekday afternoons, which was a little bit later. I think I saw the one with Susan Jameson and Michael Jason in. I remember seeing that one in the afternoon at my grandma's.
One of my earliest childhood memories is watching, I think the episode is The Computer Affair, because it's got the Shadowmobiles in the forest. And I remember the smell of burning roast beef, which was the cue that my dad was doing Sunday lunch. And I think I can pinpoint that memory to the 24th of March, 1974. So it had an impact on me. I had the toys, so I must have liked it.
Yeah, I mean, you just said that the transporters were in the forest. Well, that doesn't narrow down the episode.
That's true. That is true.
UFOs did have a strong arboreal obsession, didn't they?
They never go to the city, do they? All the houses are stately homes or cottages in the middle of nowhere, aren't they?
Yeah, well, I mean, they certainly crashed into the odd cottage, didn't they, as well, which was, they had it in for cottages. They didn't seem to like them.
Obviously, Lou Grade had his eye on America, and the reason they made 26 episodes was to sell it into syndication, and I believe that's what they managed to do. And then it kind of took off, didn't it?
It did. This is one of the weirdest coming togethers, I think, that you had, because it was bought by CBS, and CBS was as a Tiffany network, as it was known then. When Saturday nights were a thing in America, when people watched TV on Saturday nights, they actually had an incredible night of comedy, All in the Family, which was the Till Death Us Do Part, the American version, but a great show in its own right. Mary Tyler Moore Show, Bob Newhart show, Carol Burnett show, pretty much all on the same night. They also had Mission Impossible, I think, was there as well. So they used to have an agreement then with the affiliates. The networks used to say that you could have the lead-off program between 7 and 8. And the lead-off program was UFO. So you have adverts in the New York Times with picture of a UFO and Mary Tyler Moore in the same advert, because it was all part of the same sequence. And obviously it benefited from that, and it did incredibly well. And because of that popularity, there's a great thing I found in the Stage newspaper where Ed Bishop actually wrote a letter to the Stage explaining how well it was doing. It was first in its time period in New York for 4 consecutive weeks. And basically saying that Jerry Anderson has been asked by ATV to start preparing for a second series. And he also ends nicely by saying that the hundreds of artists and technicians who worked on this series at MGM and Pinewood, I thought they would appreciate this information, because he talks about how it was ignored. And now actually it's getting its credit. And sadly, the ratings started to droop. Even though Lou Grade had put in a lot of money to start developing the second series, he got cold feet. The only reason the ratings dropped was because it was around the time that there were no new episodes of All in the Family and the repeats.
Yeah, they put repeats on, didn't they?
They put repeats on, and that would be the only reason. So it was probably a shame that that was a decision, but basically that's what happened.
So they came pretty close, didn't they, to making UFO season 2?
They did. What do we think it would be like?
Well, it would have been better than the Space 1999, that's for sure.
Oh, don't antagonise the Space 1999.
I just think UFO
fans.
is head and shoulders above Space 1999. Didn't they start making sets or designing sets? They were going to set it mainly on the moon, weren't they?
Well, that's where the sort of taking the moon out of orbit and stuff, because that was because ITV in the US were so hostile to any episode shown on Earth that they wanted that to be ruled out. And the way they were going to do that was they did do drawings of an expanded moon base. It was going to be 10 years later, and it was all going to be set on the moon with probability that Earth would not be involved at all. And because they'd done that work, when they decided not to do UFO anymore, Jerry Anderson persuaded Lou Grade to let him think up a new series, which is where Space 1999 came from.
And am I right that when they realised they weren't going to make UFO anymore, they sold all the sets, and a lot of the stuff went to the BBC, didn't it? And some of it turns up in Doctor Who, I believe.
There's a brilliant thing in Chris Bentley's book where he lists all the programs that have used the thing. Some of the spacesuits were in Doomwatch before UFO even transmitted. I was watching Carry On Loving the other week, and it's got the dating agency with a computer in the background, and I went, my God, that's from UFO, and looked it up in the book, and it is. It literally is. Yeah, they were using it in Doctor Who up to Revelation of the Daleks. But it's on like Stanley Baxter Picture Show, Come Back Mrs. Noah, the sitcom with Molly Sugden, extensively used all the time. They're great sets. The other thing that was interesting was that some of the computer reels, the computer reels, the big tape reels, they were literally from IBM. Someone who worked on the crew knew someone who worked at IBM, and when IBM were getting rid of loads of their old kit, they just took it and used it on UFO.
Talking about the props and the sets, John, we haven't mentioned the cars that all the Shadow operatives drive. They're very distinctive cars with those gull-wing doors, and Ed Straker's car was the colour of diarrhea. Do you know where his car ended up?
I don't know.
His car ended up with the hairy cornflake.
Oh.
Yeah, Dave Lee Travis bought it. I don't know if he managed to get the doors working, because those doors never actually worked properly. They had to be manually lifted by people on the set.
That's right. I mean, apparently, every time you see the door open in the background, there is someone just standing off camera with a stick holding the gull wing up. Do you think the hairy cornflake had an assistant who constantly followed him around?
He was worried that no one would recognise the fact it was from UFO, as he painted UFO on the door. It looks horrendous.
Oh, dear. Still, I suppose it's not the worst of his crimes.
No, that's true. And UFO ended up on VHS tape in the early 80s, didn't it, when they compiled several episodes together into a feature film. I think it was called Invasion UFO.
Yeah, Invasion UFO was the one that was in the video shops, because when Space 1999 came along, they stopped repeating UFO and you started just getting Space 1999. So Invasion UFO was the first time you could get it, and then they started repeating UFO in 86, 87, which was great because it was Thursday night coming back from the pub. It was perfect. And then they started releasing videos in the 90s.
And it was first released on DVD in 2002.
Yeah, there were 2 box sets.
I've got them somewhere.
I've got them, still got them. Carlton DVD release. And it's worth, I think, mentioning the mighty Jonathan Wood, who did the work on that. It's one of his favorite series. And as I was mentioning earlier, they look amazing. I think it's one of the first really outstanding DVD releases of a TV program. Everybody, I think, had forgotten about UFO, or only sort of fans knew about it from the videos. And to see it looking like that, because you saw the money that they'd spent on the program, and it was like, where has this mad epic TV series come from that is so obscure and, you know, kind of like died a death basically back in the day? And I would say that those DVD releases are still worth getting if you haven't got them, because you can find them cheap now, and the color is so amazing on it. It's so rich, brilliant.
And the Blu-ray, it looks amazing. I don't know if that's still in print. It probably isn't, but it comes with an amazing book.
Yeah,
by Andrew Pixley, which tells you everything you need to know about UFO.
It is. It's great. I know there's some quibbles about which is the best Blu-ray release, and a new one has just come out from Imprint in Australia, which addresses some of those quibbles. But no, the Pixley book, as usual, Andrew, as I've discovered, when you go to things like the other books that have been done in the past, even though obviously Chris Bentley's book is great, but when you like watch the old UFO documentary and things like that, you realize that Andrew has just synthesized everything in his book. So, you know, you'll find it's even got the bit about the novelizations, which I thought I discovered for myself, but it's in there.
We couldn't have done this podcast without his help.
No, absolutely. With his help, Chris Bentley's help, and also Fanderson, who make available some great merchandise, and their podcast as well, which has had some Andy hints in there as well.
And if you fancy watching UFO right now, it's available on ITVX, completely free and in HD.
Yeah, I don't like that order that they show them in on that, but don't worry about it.
What
Just
order
watch
is
it.
that?
I think it's the original
ATV order, isn't it?
ATV order,
Yeah.
which I've got. I don't like the cat with 10 lives coming so early, but maybe that's just me being a bit anal.
We'll put our heads together and come up with the perfect order to watch them in.
Yeah, how hard can it be?
So, John, would you recommend UFO? Silly question.
Absolutely, yep. Wholeheartedly.
There's only, I would say, maybe 1 or 2 episodes that aren't particularly great, but even then, the vibes are fantastic, aren't they? That's what the kids say today, isn't it? The vibes.
I think they are. I mean, one of the things, you know, you'll find is it can be a bit tiresome when you're watching them when they go into the launch again, you know, for particular vehicles, because it's a bit like Thunderbirds, you know, you have to wait. Everything stops while something gets launched, but that changes after a while. But that's the thing that makes you think, am I watching a drama here? Or am I watching something that's a merchandising opportunity? But other than that, I just think there's so many interesting things going on in there. And it rises above some of its unpromising thing to do with the fact that you can't have the kind of too much continuity, because that just wasn't what happened in those days. But it's a great show.
Are you all right? That's me up there. That's my life. That was my son.
Oh, the juvenile. Nice little actor. As I was saying, I think it'll make a great episode.
I've got one other bit of UFO trivia for you. Peter Gordino's son, who is also called Peter Gordino, is currently a member of Depeche Mode.
What?
Yeah, he's been in Depeche Mode for years. I saw them live in 2006, and at the end of the concert, when they introduced the band, David Gahan goes, Peter Gordino, and I'm like, what? He must be 80. But no, it was his son. Yeah,
I'm reeling from that news.
They've never done a cover version of the UFO theme tune, but I live in hope.
Yeah, this time.
So, before we go, John, just another quick plug for our Patreon. If you join, you get a free essay to go with every podcast. You also get to see uncut video versions of the podcast too, and it's completely free to join. So please check out patreon.com/World of Telly. We'd really appreciate it. So that's UFO crossed off our list. What are we watching next month, John?
Run!
Okay, for people who don't know what that means, what are we watching?
It means we're watching Philip Martin's crazy series Gangsters. Started off as a play for today and then ran for 2 series in the 70s, and anybody who's seen it will never forget it.
I can't wait for that. And until then, I've been Neil.
And I've been John.
And you've been listening to The World of Telly.